Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the PromoMinds podcast, the interview series. I'm your host, Steve Leslie, and today we have a special guest who has been a really good mentor of mine in the real estate world. He invests in, I think just the US now, but he's invested in Canada and the US. He has an amazing podcast called A Canadian Investing in the US, which I got a lot of information from that podcast in starting out investing in the States. He's also a family man. He has two terrific kids, loves hockey, loves hanging out by the pool, and he's even explored some caves. And so he's got a real servant mentality. I'm very happy to bring him on. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome Glen Sutherland.
Well, thanks for having me on, Steve. I really appreciate it. That was quite the intro. You talked about the caves and everything.
Yeah, how were the caves, by the way? That was kind of the last time we talked.
It was not something I'd never done before. So what Steve's alluding to is I went down to Kentucky and went kayaking through caves underwater, like our underground caves for kayaking. So it was awesome. It's just dark. You have your headlamps and anyway, I recommend it. If you're in Kentucky, try it out.
That's amazing. So, Glen, I want to kick things off here real quick. Just curious, when did you first decide to get started in real estate investing? And was there anyone who influenced you to steer that way, or how did that come about?
That's an interesting question. So, maybe to give a little bit of background, and this isn't cheating, but my parents had a duplex growing up. So originally, we lived in the duplex, and we lived in the whole property. And it was a duplex before we owned it, and then we lived in it for 10 something years. I don't know how long. Anyway, a while in that property, and then when we moved, because my dad took a different job, we turned it back into a duplex, and then my parents would have me go there all the time and help, do trim floors every time there's a tenant turnover, fix stuff. So it wasn't really cheating though, because it wasn't like my parents didn't have it wasn't a business. Like, let's word it like that. It wasn't a business. It was some real estate, which does work, right? Just having real estate does work. But by taking a lot of courses, a lot of education, a lot of hard knocks from just figuring stuff out, there's a lot of better ways to run real estate, to turn it into a business so it actually makes money and is efficient. So anyway, I started growing up with that. I originally bought a condo in Kitchener, and then when that appreciated, I refinanced it and bought another condo in Waterloo, and it just sort of started going like that. Actually, after my first condo in Waterloo, which was a rental property, I declared that I was never going to do real estate again. I had the worst tenants. They destroyed a brand new built condo. It was just the worst. I had to go through the landlord tenant board to get them removed. It was every story you could possibly think about. But I sat there after the closing table thinking I'm never going to do this again. But I'm like, but I got handed a check for $40,000 more than I put into it. So there's something here. I don't know what I'm doing properly, but there is a way to make this work. And it kind of went down that path. I started doing renovations in Cambridge, and after a while, I just took the stab and I went into the U.S. So then it actually turned into a business. It started because before I was just sort of dabbling. I had 3, 4, sometimes 5 at a time, right? And you're in and out of properties. So I don't know.
Cool. How many years ago was that when you first started buying properties, or when you went into Kitchener there?
So we're 2023 now. That was probably, I think it was 2006, something like that. So it was a few years ago, right? So a bit of appreciation has happened since then, even if you weren't running properties as efficiently as you could.
And when did you start buying south of the border?
Well, I was probably, I think it was 2005 or 2006, right? And no, is that right? That can't be right. 2015 or 2016. Yeah. So never mind. So not good at figuring these dates out. I don't usually get asked them too often. But the way that started is I used to do back then podcasting was new. It was there wasn't, I don't, as far as I know, there wasn't Canadian podcasts on real estate at that point. So it was all the big podcasts. They still exist to this day. But I ended up listing those a lot, and a lot of it was, well, actually, it was all for American real estate. And I just started slowly piecing together what it would take as a Canadian to be able to do that in the US. And it eventually I just took a stab at it. When I bought my first property, I didn't know how to do financing. I didn't know how to do a lot of stuff. But I think with some of this and some people that are very successful in doing real estate or business or anything, they see an opportunity and they take a stab at it and they'll figure it out as they go. They'll hire people, they'll work with people, and build this out into something. And I think that was the trick. If I would have waited to try to figure everything out, if I was waiting for every light to be green down the road, I don't know if I still would have bought there. And it's been many years and many, many properties that we've purchased, sold, renovated, everything. I just wouldn't be there if I didn't just have to, take a stab at it.
So when you first ventured into the States there, you had mentioned, you were listening to some podcasts, mainly American real estate. Were there any sort of mentors that you gravitated towards, or whether you knew them in person or in the podcast world?
Oh, so off the start, I would say, I don't know if I really had mentors. I went to a lot of real estate meetups. So I guess it wasn't meetups, but it was like regularly meet up for a drink, meet up for a coffee with a lot of regular people. One of the people, if we're going to do shout outs, that gave me one of the big pushes, which was to start the podcast, was actually Joe Fairless. I was talking with him and we used to do some stuff together way back in the day. I was actually a passive partner, but he came on my show, but even before that, we were talking, and that's one thing about having a podcast. You can leverage to have conversations with people you normally wouldn't get to have conversations with. But anyway, this is before even the podcast, and I was talking with Joe, and he's like, you have to do a podcast. He's like, you have to do a podcast. You got to put it out there. You got to give as much value as possible. Don't hold anything back. And when you're ready to quit, you're getting close. When you think there's no way you're going to put in another hour of recording, another half hour, an hour or 2 hours in editing, because you do it all of yourself at the start, right? And whenever you think you're ready to quit and you don't need to put out another episode, then you're getting close. And off the start, it was no one was listening. To be honest, to this date, I have never paid for anyone to promote my podcast, the YouTube channel, anything. It's all grown from people telling other people, right? So it's the hardest way to do it, but it's the most authentic. I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of went on a tangent there.
No, you did drop a name there. Jay Fairless, was that the name?
Yeah, Joe Fairless. Yeah, he's the
Joe Fairless. Sorry,
he was the host of the best real estate investing ever best ever real estate investing podcast. Yeah.
Wow. And funny enough, that's kind of how we started our friendship. Was Glenn reached out to me when I was down in Utah back in 2019, and at the time, a few months prior, I was actually starting to look in the States, but really wasn't that interested at that point. And then I was in Utah, and he reached out on Facebook and said, "Hey, I got a real estate podcast that's about Canadian investing in the States. And, we have a lot of the same mutual friends. I figured you might be interested." And then I took him up on that offer, downloaded a bunch of podcasts, and fast forward a few months, ended up buying a property in the US just prior to the world shutting down. But prior to that, or in the midst of that, I reached out to Glenn for some advice, and he invited me to come to a meetup in Toronto or Ajax, somewhere along those that line. And so I met up with him, I believe, at Cambridge turnoff on the 401. And he drove to the meetup, and I was able to ask him some questions. And that's what I mean about Glenn being having a true servant mentality. Like, not only is his podcast extremely valuable, but he's always willing to help answer questions any way that he can. So
thank you, Steve.
much appreciated. For those of you interested in learning more about real estate, specifically investing in the US as a Canadian, highly recommend checking out the podcast, A Canadian Investing in the US with Glen Sutherland. I learned so much from his podcast. Just by listening to his podcast, I was able to go buy a house, get everything set up. He's got an incredible wealth of knowledge, amazing guests, and any question that you have can be found there. So definitely check it out. That's A Canadian Investing in the US with Glen Sutherland. All right, back to the show. Okay, so how many markets are you in the US? Are you in 7 now? Is that?
It's kind of complicated because like a lot of people are like, do you count when you have like one house in a market? Are you talking the markets that you're heavily invested in, right? So like right now we have one property in Jacksonville, Florida. We have one in Brevard County, Florida, which is like Cape Canaveral. We've got I don't know, 50 or 60 in Ohio, a bunch in Kansas City, a bunch down in Huntsville, Alabama, one down in a bunch. I'm not sure exactly how many there are. There's a bunch of them. And then we have some down in Birmingham. We used to be in Indianapolis. I still love Indianapolis, but we haven't invested there. As of recently, we started purchasing in Detroit, Michigan, and we just picked up one in Adrian, Michigan as well, which is like in Michigan, but closer to Toledo, which is one of my other markets. So a little bit all over the place, which actually it's a bit of a diversity play. There's just certain markets work better for flipping, certain markets work better for BRRRRs, certain markets work better for lease options, contracts for deeds, subject to, depending on what you're trying to do. You can always force a round peg into a square hole, but certain markets are going to work better for certain things, right? And honestly, just being in so many different markets, everyone thinks of at the market, the market's in a dip, the market's on a rise, but it's really sub-markets. It's like how even that neighborhood is doing. It's not about the whole market as a whole. So by being in so many different places, it will diversify your risk and it will make things easier, right? But off the start, I had a guest on my podcast, and I think it was 4 properties in Huntsville, Alabama, and 3 or 4 in Kansas City, and I think I had 3 in Indianapolis. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And this is a very experienced guest, and he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "You need to focus on a market, because when you only have a few houses here, a few houses there, a few houses here, you're not important to any of those property managers. You become important to them when you have the 20 or 40 properties in that market." So what I did was we really focused down and grew up a few of the markets to be like have a lot of units, right? And what that did is that we did become important to those property managers and to those contractors, because after a while you become basically their client. Like, they don't need to take on all these other clients. They know you're going to pay them on time. They know how it all works. You do the same thing over and over again, and you become important to them. But what happens is eventually, as your company grows, you're going to max out those people, and that's what we're doing now. So in the last year and a half or so is where we started expanding to certain parts of Florida, where we started expanding into Michigan. We're looking at Kentucky right now, where we got into Birmingham, which we never really touched before. We were always in the north of Alabama. But you start thickening it up, because you just and it's a service as well. Like, we're talking service. People need to invest their money, right? And as soon as you can switch your mindset from being, I need to go raise money, to there's especially, like, I live in Ontario, there is a lot of people that their properties don't make sense anymore. The interest rates have killed the cash flow on it. They need something to make sense for them, right? And when you change your mindset to providing a service and helping them get to the spot, helping educate them while you're doing it, It makes it a lot easier, and it's honestly almost impossible to explain to someone how that clicks in your head. But once you do, it does click, and you realize that there is something that they need from you, and it's not you trying to get something from them. It gets so much easier. It gets so much easier to grow your business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's a mind shift that, it definitely takes a little while to make. But like you said, once you make it, it like completely revolutionizes everything.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I was going to say, so you're in like a bunch of different markets down in the States, which is amazing. If you continue your, conquering Michigan there, if you need any contacts, I got a couple in the, I don't know, the thumb area, or not the thumb, but kind of right there area.
Yeah.
Michigan looks like a hand, but anyways. So besides outside of being in all these markets, you have an amazing podcast, and you also have a coaching program, which I saw that you recently revamped, and it looks even better than when I took it. And you're also speaking at events. Like, first off, do you ever sleep? And I guess secondly is, where does this ambition come from?
Cool. Okay, so yes, I have a lot of stuff on the go. I don't know if you saw the email this morning I sent out. We have I think 5 events lined up right now. I do sleep, and the ambition. I think it's that's a tough question. You know what I mean? Part of it is, it's you need to grow, but the thing is, you need your life, right? And that's one of the things that I as much as I work, I like to work really, really hard for short periods of time, which a lot of people don't get it, because when people think that you have to work 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day, it doesn't make any sense. It has to work for your schedule, right? So I don't start working until my kids are on the bus, and I stop working before my kids get off the bus, right? Because that's what's important to me. But and even still, I like to take a lot of days off, right? I take every weekend off. I try to put my phone down, and I try to take a day or two off during the week. Right now, we're recording this in September, so right now it's a little bit different because we I've put off a lot of stuff over the summer, right? So in the summer, I wasn't recording the podcast. We pre-record the whole thing in June. A lot of it's being really efficient with your time, with batching, with phone calls. My Thursdays and Fridays, I usually do back-to-back calls from the whole day from my kids getting on the bus to off the bus, every second, the whole day. And if you did spread that out across the week, you would find that you were just constantly, you couldn't get anything done, right? Because I still buy. We've been putting offers on 80-unit apartment buildings, 92-unit apartment building last week. Really getting into the apartment building. That's what's really exciting me right now. But if you don't do this batching, you're not going to have time to run your business, to do all these other things, right? And all these other things that interest you, right? I always wanted to hold a conference. We're finally holding a conference. Originally, I didn't even want to do the coaching. To be completely honest, how the original coaching came along is some people they approached me and they said, hey, can we pick your brain for hour on Friday? And then I did it, and then we did it again, and we did it again. And other people heard about it and they wanted to do it, and it once again, it was an organic thing. All of a sudden there was 6 of them, and they're like, hey, I'm like, can we just combine you all into the same hour? And then we started doing it, and I started recording it, and then I started, we have a topic, and it's just built out into a course over time. But it wasn't the intention to do the coaching. And even with the coaching, I don't ever want to be one of those coaches who isn't buying. I want to be the most active person that everybody knows. I want to be the guy that's always buying. We were in 2022. I know the market was a little hotter there, but we were buying a house every week. So we were really really flying, right? And what happens is when you start to do that, and then you start to get all these people interested in investing in it, that's where the department comes in, right? Let's pool this, because it's getting to be so much work to find this many deals. It's exhausting. It's not easy to find a deal, especially now. Even though the markets are down, the sellers still want certain prices. It doesn't make any sense. It's harder to find enough deals. So you buy an apartment, you honestly, I believe you're a little less susceptible to the market. Because when you buy an apartment building, it's based on your operating income, right? Applied to a cap rate. And that's the value of the property. It's and when I'm buying a single family home, what I'm doing is every single time, I never buy anything that's like rent ready. Let's just buy it, rent it, and it'll be worth a lot more money. Every time it's a force. Like we're buying something undervalued, and we're gonna budget in a renovation. Ideally, I want to be at 65% of what the value when I sell that property or when I refinance that property right from the start. And I want to push that. I want to push it right from the start. I don't want to be the passive guy to just sit there and go. So long story, long answer. Like, I don't know. I don't know what the driving force is. But I think the driving force really is, as crazy as this will sound, it's to become passive, right? You work and you work and you juggle so much on your mind. And as you continue to grow this, you get to a point where you can bring other people in to do parts of the job, and you can turn this from being a bunch of houses into, or a bunch of units and apartment buildings, and you turn this into a business where you have other people to do these things and you manage over them. Because if your intent is like, if I'm sure you've talked about this book before with that what's that called, Revisited, what's that book called? It's gonna kill me. Oh man, it's gonna kill me. Anyway, there's a book. What?
Who's it by?
Oh, should have planned for this a bit better. Anyway, there's a book about this girl with the pie shop and turning it into a business. But anyway, amazing book. I'll get it to you later. You can put it in the show notes or whatever. Amazing book. But you really have to turn this into a business at some point. You can't do this all. If you are going to do everything, if you're going to be the cook, you're going to be the engineer, and you're not actually going to be able to grow this, right? And you're going to kill yourself working, right? What I like to do is find alignments of interest. If there's people that can work for me that don't actually have to work off of a salary, is the most ideal. So it's like a commission-based thing. So in real estate, who are commission-based people? Commission-based people would be like realtors, right? So what can realtors do for you besides just doing realtoring, right? Maybe there's some other alignments, right? Working with wholesalers, they're based on commission as well. Maybe moving some of your property managers to project managers, just everything you can possibly do, especially off the start as you're growing this. It doesn't make sense to hire this big team with this huge salary. And then if the market changes and you don't have the ability to buy, you're going to be stuck there still paying these salaries. If you can have so many of your people, as many as possible, VAs are going to be different. VAs, you're going to have to be paying them like they're $4 to $6 an hour as a salary. But with a lot of these people, if you can bring them in based on commission, if you stop buying, you don't have the salary to keep paying, right? Whenever in last year when they first did the rate hikes in I don't know, September or August or whatever like that with 2022, I paused. I stopped buying. We finished off projects. I breathed. I went to masterminds. I got myself around people who were smarter than me, and I wanted to soak in as much as possible. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to make mistakes with my money. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to make mistakes with other investors' money. And I didn't have to. I didn't have to buy. I kept my, I don't know if we're allowed to swear on here, but I kept my oh shit money, right? I kept that. I had that money. If I didn't buy anything for the next 2 years, I was going to be okay. And people go, that's insane to keep that money there. But that's your proof of funds money. You want to get good loans. The more you can show these lenders, the easier it's going to be to get the loans. Most people's backwards idea is, I'm going to use all that money so I don't need the lenders. But then when you need the lenders, they're not going to give you the money. Right? That's how it always works. When you don't need lenders, they'll give you money. When you need lenders, they won't give you money. Right? So if you just work that way. You grow your business. You partner with people. You take smaller pieces of the pie, and you try to pay people based on commission. That's how I grow my business.
Wow.
And,
hey guys, if you're into hiking at all, I highly recommend subscribing to my YouTube page, Steve Leslie Hikes. That's Steve Leslie Hikes on YouTube. I have a lot of content on there from some of the crazy hikes that I've been on, including Angel's Landing in Zion National Park. And it'd be really cool to connect on there. So please check me out. Thanks. There was a lot of great stuff there. Because you've started, you were doing everything, and you've had to build that up over time. And a common thread for you seems to be like batching everything. You batch your phone calls all into one day. You batched your the people that wanted your advice into a group that's now a coaching group.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you're very efficient. And I think because you still had a job for, like you only left your job, a few years back?
Yeah, I think 2020, end of 2020, something like that. Yeah.
Because I think you were still working when you and I met up.
Oh yeah, yeah.
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 So
but it's a big change even to do that, right? Like, I was the one that was, paying for the house. You're putting your all your cards on the table when you leave your job. This has to work. It has to work. And the hard part is a lot of people think when you're going to leave your job, I want everything complete. Like I want to be making the cash flow I need. I need all this stuff going. And yeah, I had that going. And I planned on leaving my job 2 years before that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to leave my job. And the universe told me it wasn't ready. It wasn't time to leave your job. I'd been making a cash flow. It was more than my regular income that I was making from my 9-to-5 job at that point. But what happened in that month is I think it was half of the portfolio I had back then all went vacant the exact same month. All the tenants moved out the exact same month. And I realized, how would I live with this? Like, how would I survive if I needed this every single month? And it just makes you stop and think, like, what is it? What would make this carry through? And it's honestly, you have to have spare money. You can't be living on your last dollar every month. You can't live like a regular employee. You have to start, batching and saving money, and that'll make it a lot safer. Anyway, I could go into a whole probably hour and a half rant about how to leave your job, because there's a lot of stuff to get set up before you even leave there, because financing is going to change a lot. The principal residence, everything, right? Which is scary. Like sometimes it might be you don't even leave your job because you have a mortgage renewal in a year and a half, and you're like, you know what? Let's just hold on, right? Because this has to work. I have to live somewhere.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that you talk about in your program. I remember you were talking about, don't just walk away. Make sure here's some guidance, I guess, some steps on how to make sure that you'll be safe. But I think it's a fine line too, because when I walked away from my job last year, it was more, I came to a point where I was like just mentally and physically exhausted, and I needed a break. And I've spent the last year kind of reinventing myself and getting set up for the next stage. And much like what you said earlier about the, kind of having that mind shift where you actually have something to offer somebody else rather than feeling desperate trying to pitch people. There's a fine line there of like, okay, well, yes, you can, if you leave your job or if you make a change, what's the worst case scenario and what's the best case scenario? And are you leaving something that's going to lead to, if that decision is going to lead to something very negative, or is it just that decision to take you to that next level? So there's definitely a fine dance.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
I got to say, Glenn, you're probably one of the most organized people that I have ever met. You talked about all your systems and whatnot. And for the audience who are watching this, you can't really see it, but I'm sure if you were to pan the camera, you'd have a couple huge bulletin boards full of all of the stuff that you got going on. And I remember that explanation there of going from this pile to that pile to that pile.
Well, that's the thing. Like, a lot of people think that with your systems that it has to be like this organized software platform, but it has to be what works for you. Because I did the software platform, and honestly, if I didn't see stuff or I didn't get a notification of something, certain things would skip my mind, right? You can only hold so much. You're handling so many properties. Even though you have property management in place, it doesn't matter. They still need to be managed. But anyway, yeah, that's exactly it. What you just said is you just have to have a system where it's this step, this step, this step for everything. It has to, and it's grueling to write it out. But think about it. If you just something happened to you and your wife had to take over, or whoever, could they do it? Is there like a written anything to tell them how to do this? And even like the example I like to use in the class is even to pay your credit cards, right? It's not just pay your credit cards. That's not the system. The system needs to be, I got an invoice. Check the bank account to make sure that there's money to pay the invoice. Pay the invoice on the corporate credit card. Pay the corporate credit card off with the bank account. Upload the document that you got into the Google Drive so that it's organized, right? Update your bookkeeper or update the bookkeeping if you're doing it yourself, right? Like, just to pay a single bill, it's should be like a 5 to 7 step process. And if you start to break your whole system down like that, it'll take some time, but you start thinking about it every time. We have, like you mentioned, the coaching program. So now I have a mastermind program as well. And with the mastermind, there's people who come into the program, out of the program. There's people who are always just joining and they want a few months just to figure out, because they need something, right? We were trying to get people across the finish line. It's about completion. And so they join. And what it needs to do is I just need to first send them out an email. It needs to have the link to the mastermind Facebook group, to the WhatsApp chat. So it's an automated email. So you just have to initiate the process and work your way down the checklist. You need to update. For the way I do it is I have an Excel sheet. Excel sheet has who they are, what the name is, what they paid, when their membership expires. That is all linked up to the back end of the course. And basically, you just have to have steps, right? You need to, everything you start to do, and just making, even at least at the start, make a notepad file or a Word document, whatever you like to use, on just how to do each of these things, right? Because what's going to happen is you're going to be tired one day and you're like, as dumb as this sounds, you'll be like, oh, what was, I feel like I just haven't had a new student in a while. Like, I took the summer off, and you're like, let's go check that. And you just look at the list. What happens next? What happens next? What happens next? And you start doing it with everything. You start, systemizing your business. Oh, we found a property. Okay, now let's start working with a checklist. We have a checklist to work down for the underwriting. Now we have a checklist to send it out to potential people who invest with us. And then you have a checklist that you want the contractor to go through. This is a template of what I want you to fill in. I want to know the dates of when completed items are going to. I want you to take that scope that you gave me and batch it all up. I want everything to run through. And ideally, I'd like it to look the same every time. I want to be a McDonald's. Whenever I do this with Steve, and if I do it with Greg or Bob or whoever, I want it to look the same. And I want them to, so the next time that Steve works with me, he just knows exactly what to expect. He sees the checklist. He sees the Google Drive structure just drop in, and it just all starts pre-filling in. Everyone wants to see it work the same over and over again. Anyway, we're going on a rant. I don't know if we wanted to talk about systems, but
anyway. That was amazing.
Yeah.
It really, backed up what I said about, you being one of the most organized people I've ever met. So that was awesome. So I guess the last thing that I want to speak on in terms of the coaching program, I definitely highly recommend taking it, because I view it as a free course, because the money that it saves you in the long run, not even the long run, it could be the next month, is thousands of dollars. So this, like, what is it now? It's
$2,500 right now. So
yeah.
But it's everything. Like you took the course, so like it has everything you need. And then what I maybe I'll give everyone a quick example of it. But what happened was we used to like when Steve took it, it was all live. It was with me. I taught the course, and last September I had 8 courses running, and I did the exact same spiel every hour for 8 hours. And with everything, we just talked about systems. You go, well, this doesn't make any sense. So what we did was we did recordings. We've changed it to recordings, but then you go, it's missing the personal touch. It's missing the interaction. That's why we built the mastermind. So then we meet up to actually solve problems, to answer questions. And we don't meet up for me to educate you because it's the same stuff every time. We meet up to get you to buy the property, to get you across the finish line, to get you over the fear, to get past whatever is happening, the questions you have. That's what we want to meet up for. We don't want to meet up just to do education. It doesn't make any sense, right? So let's have the education all automated and then meet up to do the final touches. So that's what the course is now. We've changed it a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think that's amazing, because to have that time, like you said, to kind of get some hands-on, answer some questions, and kind of reiterate the course that you're learning, I think is phenomenal. You had mentioned that you're doing a conference now.
Yeah.
Maybe you could speak a little bit on that, because I was actually unaware of this.
Oh, so depending when this airs, so October 21st, 2023, which is Saturday. That's the right date, right? I'm gonna double check. Yep. So on that date, we rented the DoubleTree Hilton in Mississauga by the airport, and we're doing an all-day conference. So we're gonna, I'll be speaking. I'll probably do a couple speeches up there, and then I don't know if we should be name dropping everyone who's coming, but Brady McDonald, Quentin D'Souza, Arlen Bonin, who's on my other podcast with me. I'm bringing up some of the Americans, Ali Ajami, Brent Green, to just talk corporate structure, talk all kinds of legalese and accounting. Anyway, and then we have some other syndicators from around, but it's more focused on how to do multifamily in the U.S. for this one. But anyway, I think it's going to be a huge networking opportunity. If you're looking like, hey, I have some time, maybe there's something you can help somebody else with. And maybe I have some money. And there's going to be a lot of people there that are interested in the same thing. So I think it's a lot of it's going to be networking, just help a lot of people build teams and find a place to do what they want to do. Right. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I know I'm heading to Mexico right around there, so it might actually work out perfect. I think I leave like a day after that or something. But
well, it's right beside the airport.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And so, what kind of success stories have you seen with some of your students? It's just going back a little bit to the coaching program, because just maybe you could speak on that.
The hard part about doing success stories is you can't take really credit for them all. Like there's some people that were super successful in Canada and they just needed the course to just know how to do the same thing in the US. So I've had some people that have taken the course, and like I have a multifamily course as well, and some of them went and bought apartment buildings, right? But can I take the credit for that? I don't think so. I think they just needed the information to go along, right? We've had people who just taken the course and they went and bought their Airbnb down in Florida, right? That's perfectly successful. I have people taking the course and they've flipped 3 houses a year now. I think that's kind of, I have another guy who's doing Ohio, and I think he's 7 houses in his first year. He did 2 houses while the course was going on, and he took it back in the sort of timeline when you were taking it, when we were doing it in, well, not call it in person, but over Zoom every single time. Mm-hmm. So it depends what you define success at. But if you want to buy in the U.S., you can buy in the U.S. after taking the course. Like you're not going to know just like, how to buy, what are the simple things, how to set up a corporation. Like there's a lot of differences in the U.S. How to do a lease option, how to do a subject to, right? How to inherit American mortgages. Mortgages are ridiculously expensive. How awesome would it be to take an American's mortgage who set it up like 2 years ago, instead of just buying the house, buy the mortgage with it? Because in the U.S. you can split the mortgage and the deed. You can't do that in Canada. So anyway, it depends what you're looking for. I have I'd say more than half buy a house at least, right? So I think it's good. And I think it's, no matter what, there's certain people that are never going to buy a house. And those are the people you still need to help, right? And those could be the people that you joint venture with. They're the ones that they have the money, or they have the time, or there's some sort of skill that they have, but they aren't able to get to the finish line for whatever reason. They've taken, 10 other courses, and honestly, there's a fear or something underlying, but maybe you can help them even by, walking the hand, by working with them on a project, right through the finish line, that in the end, now maybe they can do it themselves, or maybe they just like the passiveness that they can just drop the money and get a paycheck. It depends on the people, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Glen, we're coming up to the end here. I got 2 quick questions for you.
Sure, I'll try to be quicker.
Number one is, do you have any pieces of advice that you could give an entrepreneur who's just starting out their business? And if there's one, maybe 2 pieces of advice that you could give, what would it be?
Do it. Just do it. I used to I had a business before this. I don't know if you knew this. I used to have a screen printing shop. But with business, it's tough. I started young. I'd say you don't have to be young, but it has a huge advantage. Whenever I was in college, I did a co-op term that was entrepreneurial. I built my own business. I got bursaries from the government. If you're a kid, there is so much money out there that can help you jumpstart this whole thing, right? So honestly, do it. Don't wait for every light to be green. If it's too difficult, it's too daunting, take some education or partner with someone. Those are the big things. If you try to do this all yourself, it's going to be tough. Give away a piece of the pie, and do bigger stuff, or do more stuff, right?
Awesome. I like that. Just do it. Yeah.
Just do it.
And lastly, you tried to allude to this earlier, actually. Do you have any book recommendations for people? And it doesn't have to be genre specific. It can be anything.
Oh, there's that one that I read all the time, but it's totally slipped my mind. And someone's like sitting there going, Glen, they're yelling the name. Like, The E-Myth Revisited. That's what it's called. The E-Myth Revisited. That is an incredible book for entrepreneurs, right? You want to learn how to build a business, or just take a pie shop to a franchise? That's it, right? And it's simple, easy to understand. If you're into real estate, I love a lot of those Bigger Pockets books. I'm a sucker for them. Long distance real estate investing. I love the Stefan Arnio books, the Money People Deals. If you're into apartment syndication or the big stuff, I love the Best Ever book from Joe Fairless. I've done a couple drops for him. There's lots of them. Anyway, those are I love to read. I love to podcast, or I usually do the audiobooks. I do have a pile of real books. I'm not illiterate, but I can go cut the grass and listen to a book. I can do 2 things at once. It's a lot easier than finding the time to just sit down. I want to spend time with my family whenever I'm sitting around, and I want to be the guy on the earphones.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Glen, thank you so much for coming on and doing this. And I hope we didn't go over time here. But again, really appreciate it. And I have not read the E-Myth Revisited yet, so I'm definitely going to check that one out, along with the other recommendations that you had.
That's the best one. There's a whole bunch of E-Myths. The E-Myth Revisited is the best one.
Okay, good to know. So, Glen, before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
No. If you want to find me, I'm available everywhere. Type my name into Google, it'll show up. My phone number's on my website. My email's on my website. My actual cell number, believe it or not. But I take calls all the time. So if I don't answer, leave a message, because I tend to be busy during business hours, but I'm accessible and I want to help.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you again, Glenn. And you can find more information at glensutherland.com or check out his podcast, A Canadian Investing in the US. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of PromoMinds podcast. I'm Steve Leslie, and if you want help crafting your message or sharing your story, feel free to reach out. I'd love to help. Love coming up with ideas, and we can have a nice chat. So reach out to promominds@gmail.com and I'll respond. Take care.